Hello, my friends. This is Daniel Cleland, the CEO and co-founder of Soltara Healing Center in Costa Rica and in Peru. And you are listening to the S.M.E. Stories podcast.
You are now listening to the next great small business podcast. Welcome to the S.M.E. Stories podcast, where it is all about small businesses in Canada. And here's your host, Ken Alfred.
Hey everybody, thanks for downloading the show. We got a great episode today with Daniel Cleland. So Daniel Cleland is an author, and we're going to be talking about his latest release. But just a little bit about Daniel Cleland, actually. So Daniel Cleland is the CEO of Soltara Healing Center, which gained worldwide recognition in 2019 as the preeminent Shibibo healing center outside of Peru, and is now regularly visited by most of the prominent influencers, celebrities, and public figures. Cleland holds a master's of interculture and international communication, but he learned his hard-knock style of scaling from years of traveling, living, and hustling in the merciless Amazon jungles of South America. He's actually referred to as the Indiana Jones of entrepreneurship. His previous book was called Pulse of the Jungle, where he described how the Peruvian jungle awakened him, expanding his mind and new insights into entrepreneurship. Now, the book that we're going to be talking about today is his newest release, which will be coming out soon, which is called The 12 Laws of the Jungle, How to Become a Lethal Entrepreneur. So it's going to be a very fun episode today, as I've always wanted to have an author on the show and just to inspire others on what to do and if they want to be an author. So sit back and absorb. All right, guys, we have Daniel Cleland, accomplished author. Dan, how you doing, my friend?
Very well, sir. Thank you very much, Ken, for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here, happy to speak with you and connect with your audience.
Oh, that's great. And just so the listeners know, like, Dan is our first international guest. And like I mentioned before in a few previous episodes, when I was like, oh, wow, we have US people coming on the show. Now we have someone literally in a nice warm area right now because it's starting to get cold here in Canada. I think we're now starting to get in the fall season. But I mean, where are you right now, Dan? Just so the listeners can be jealous when they hear where you're from right now.
Yeah, well, actually, I was born and raised in Canada. I grew up in Walkerton, Ontario, went to college in London, Ontario, lived in Calgary, lived in Vancouver, lived in Victoria, worked on the ocean out in the West Coast for a year, and also lived in Kelowna. But now for the past 5 years, I've been living in Costa Rica, which is where I am right now. I also I've spent actually the better part of the last 15 years in Latin America. I lived, I've been, like I said, been here in Costa Rica for 5 years. Before that, I lived in Peru for about 4 years, running a healing center there in the Amazon jungle. And before that, I lived in Brazil. I also worked as a tour guide, working all over Latin America, from Costa Rica, Panama, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Argentina. So as we say here in Costa Rica, I may be Canadian, but ya soy más tico que gallo pinto, which means I'm more Costa Rican than gallo pinto, which is their favorite dish here. Their typical kind of classic dish here. So rice and beans.
Rice and beans. There you go. And so you can hear where all the places he's been. So Dan's only just a little bit. He's only seen the world just a little bit, right? Compared to most people.
Mostly the Americas. I haven't done a ton around like Asia or I've been to Africa at all. I've been to Europe a little bit. Maybe 6 or 8 countries in Europe. Maybe 2 countries in Asia. I think Thailand and Japan. But I really love the Americas. I love the U.S. I love Mexico. I love, anything from like Costa Rica south. So, I've made a point to really kind of make the Americas my backyard.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and the funny thing is, I'll just make this a little bit myself here, but before I met my wife, Mrs. K, for the first 24 years of my life, I've only been to 3 countries. Canada, obviously I was born in Canada. When I would play hockey in the U.S. for like those tournaments. And the one time I went to the Philippines in 1986. So up until when I was 24 years old, those are the only places I've ever been. Now, my wife, she was born in Hong Kong, and now we've been to a lot of different places. So I appreciate those who've been all over, like Dan, you went all over the place. Like you said, you haven't touched those other areas, but to me, it's like, well, that's just a matter of time before you visit Africa and other parts of Asia as well, right? Especially, you might have to do like your book tour where you're touring around the world, my friend, because you wrote a couple of books already. I know we're going to talk about that. So, let's start with that. So, Dan Cleland, author, what's your story?
Well, you mean the book story, or kind of what kind of got me to this point?
I keep it open on purpose so people can go in whatever direction they want to go with that one, especially how their company was developed and stuff like that. So we'll start with the developing your company. Let's start with that.
Sure. Okay. Sure. Great. Um, and happy to speak with a fellow Canadian. So yeah, I mean, I grew up in Walkerton, Ontario. Very fairly typical upbringing in rural Canada. Like I said, I went to London when I was 18, did some college there. Not particularly stellar in terms of grades in either high school or college. Not so much because I was dumb, but because I was unmotivated, I guess, and more concerned about kind of partying than doing well in school. Um, but that basically left me with few career options when I got out of college at kind of 23. So I got into sales work and just kind of went into the sales industry and moved up the ladder in sales. Got to a point around 25 where um, I was just utterly unenthused with typical, like you kind of when you're growing up, everything's fun and everybody around you is like concerned about partying and having fun and going out and meeting girls and stuff like that. But then around 25, people start dropping off. They start getting married. They start getting careers. They start getting older. They start getting boring. And at about that point, I found myself wanting to continue the adventure. So that's when I started traveling. I made a trip to Brazil when I was 25. It was a very much independent thing. I was living in Calgary at the time, working a sales job, an industrial sales job, and I went down to Brazil. I bought a big map. I learned about the country. I learned a little bit of Portuguese and planned a journey down there for 6 weeks. It was super exciting. I went down there, went started in Rio, and then went down south, down through Parachi and Ilha Grande, and then down to Florianopolis, and then back to Rio, and ended up spending the last few weeks like working in a rooftop patio bar, making caipirinhas and partying until 4 or 5 in the morning every night, meeting a different girl every week, um, and having just the best time of my life. And then I go back to Canada, to Calgary in the middle of January, and it's like freezing. And go back to the sales job, and I'm like, yeah, this is not going to cut it for me anymore. So I ended up kind of shifting gears and went down to work as a tour leader for a Canadian company, actually G Adventures, based in Toronto, but they just kind of specialize in the Latin American market and all over the world. So I go down to work as a tour leader, traveling through all those aforementioned countries, just kind of getting all this experience in tourism, learning the languages and things like that. Um, and then I ended up kind of wanting to do something a little more impactful. So I go back to Canada. I try to further my education, um, and ended up going to college in Kelowna, British Columbia, because the grades I had generated earlier on in life, which were like, I mean, average like 52, like just like very like barely scraping by. I was not able to get into any reputable university with those grades. So I went to college, did a year of upgrades. Like I had to upgrade like grade 11 English and like grade 12 math, and like I took some university level courses in college. Really committed to like bettering myself. And then at the end of that year, I did pretty good. I was getting like like A averages in all those courses. And then at the end of that year, I went on my sense of adventure was still very strong and kind of got the best of me. And one of my teachers, an environmental issues teacher, was doing a field trip to Australia. So she invited me to go on this field trip, and I couldn't say no. I ended up going with this group of like 30 students down
I
to
wouldn't say no
Australia.
to I wouldn't say no to Australia as well. So it's like, sure, love to go there.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was interesting. It was like go to Vanuatu and go to Australia, um, and got to Australia. Did the whole thing with the students, and then at the end of the trip, um, actually, I got this idea to try to further education there. So I ended up staying in Australia, taking a big risk, getting a door to door sales job, and then all the students go back. But that turned out to be an errant decision, and over time, that whole like experience in Australia just went to complete shit. Long story short, found myself in like a very challenging place, and that culminated with climbing a mountain one night and falling off. Uh, Climbing a mountain wasted one night,
Boy.
falling off, falling 20 meters, free falling 20 meters, and breaking my femur and my pelvis, and spending the next 40 days in the hospital in Australia. And that was, I'm going on 30 at that time. Basically, have like nothing going on for myself. So, like, just in terms of connecting with your listeners, like every entrepreneur has their own kind of aha moment or their own moment of like, for whatever reason, whatever pushed them into business, it was like, I'm not getting what I want from life, or like, I need more cash. I need more options. I need more time. I want more control over my destiny, whatever it is. And this was kind of the point for me, because I'm like 30 years old, laying in a hospital bed, all busted up. I've got no career. I've got no money. I've got no track record. The one major effort I made to like start putting my life back together by going to college that one year, went completely off track when I stayed in Australia to work this kind of sales job. And when you're turning like 30, the world starts measuring you based on your actual achievements, not about your potential, about how smooth you can talk or whatever, how well,
Hmm.
it's like, what have you done? Especially like girls, when girls are kind of getting up in age like that, they're like, they want a guy who's responsible, who's able to provide, who's able to, take care of them, provide some material resources. So I found myself being less and less successful in the romance market, as well as I became less and less successful in the economic market. So, anyways, that was kind of my aha moment, my rock bottom, when I'm laying in the hospital bed, like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And that's when I decided to go and experience ayahuasca. And I'm sure some of your listeners have heard about ayahuasca, but for me, it was really about getting control over my life and really finding my vision and finding my path. And because, fortunately, because as I explained, I had like this kind of foray into Latin America working in tourism. I knew the area. And so I went to experience ayahuasca. This is back in 2010. And it basically really helped me get a grip on my life, and kind of set myself straight in a very rapid way. Um, so I started leading group tours down to the jungle to do ayahuasca, utilizing that experience I had leading tours in the past. And I was doing that to kind of subsidize my own study with the plant medicines, and and that really just became like not only uh, functionally a cure for my aimlessness, a cure for my depression, a cure for my self kind of contempt for making so many seeming mistakes over the years, but it also became the service that undergirded my adventure into entrepreneurship. So, kind of from that point, I basically, after having so many experiences of hating the jobs, like just being absolutely miserable in every single job that I ever had, which is why I was like jumping from one job to the next, every 6 months or every year. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners can identify with that. Just being utterly unhappy with the typical job, which is why you go into business. Um, I basically decided that entrepreneurship was the way forward. So I started studying entrepreneurship and learning from people like Tim Ferriss and, Tony Robbins and, and podcasts like this one, where you're able to just consume this great content and learn from other people who have walked the path before you, learn what they have to say and teach. And then bit by bit, I built my business from a one-man operation, to like bootstrapping with my own money, working a sales job in Canada, and kind of managing my own web content and all the sales and the budgeting and the payment processing and all that kind of stuff. And then going from there to, 2 people to 4 people. Then, now we have about, I think, 40 people in the organization. We have 3 locations, one in Peru, 2 in Costa Rica, multi 7-figure business. It's life is great. And this is, I guess since that low point in the hospital bed, it's been about 13 years or so. And I've been fully on my own for about 10 years now.
Wow. It's a lot to absorb in that story there. And thanks for that, Dan. Like, you covered a lot of ground. I'm like, all right, guys, we're done with the podcast. No, I'm kidding. We have a few more questions for that, obviously, because you went through the entire journey and like all these different things. And you had your aha moment when you were just laying in the hospital bed. And, I mean, it's great that you're able to turn this around already. And you're like, staff of 40? I mean, wow, that's something that's enough. So what makes your business so successful compared to like other business that you've, seen or you talked to other owners or anything like that? What makes it so successful?
Well, I mean, that's what the whole book is about, the 12 laws of the jungle, which are basically the 12 principles that I have seen being put into practice over the years. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole kind of collection of things. Like, first of all, the some of the more difficult experiences I've had that have tested my will have allowed me to really weather the storms of growth, because growing a business is very hard, especially if you're not super well capitalized, or if you're in a risky market. You really have to have grit and endurance to sustain yourself and sustain the organization through the really stressful and hard times. So I think having tested my will before getting into business was one aspect that allowed me to to really stay strong throughout the hard times and keep everything afloat and bootstrap things when I need to, or go on like emergency fundraising hunts when I needed to, things like that. But I think in terms of this business, Soltara, it's really the people that we attract into this organization. I mean, first of all, you need to have a strong market for your product or service. Like, you need to. If there's no market, you're not going to sell anything. But we found a really good market. The timing was good for this particular business. But what really sets us apart is the amount of talent that we brought into this organization. And there's a certain nuance to attracting super top quality talent. You really have to put your people first. So I actually have 2 chapters in the book that are about the team, about people. Law 6 is build your masterful tribe, and Law 11 is let the village eat first. And by the way, the first point I mentioned there, law one of the book is the jungle doesn't care. The jungle doesn't care if you live or die, and nor does the market. So that's kind of about upgrading your mental toughness. And then, law two is shape your mind to warfare. Law three is learn to hunt, which is about selling. Law four is set your destination, which is about vision. Law five is map your route, which is about setting a strategic a set of strategic checkpoints. Law six is build your masterful tribe, which is about attracting top quality talent. Law seven is plan for snake bites, which is about building resilience against betrayals and setbacks and downturns and stuff like that. Law eight is master your resources, which is about ensuring your business has abundant profits to keep your organization healthy. Law nine is sharpen your spear, which is about getting yourself into prime fighter condition so that you don't miss opportunities when they come up spontaneously. Law 10 is Law 10. Law 11 is let the village eat first, and Law 12 is prepare for winter, which is about preparing for the inevitable economic winters, which is we're entering one right now.
Yeah. And sorry, can you just repeat Law 10 actually? Because I think you just cut out there just for that split second, and then when you came back, you're already into Law 11.
I actually I actually can't remember what Law 10 is.
Right. You got a lot of laws there, my friend, and this is the rules that you follow, how you build.
Law
10?
You
got it? Okay, let's
Law
go.
10 is the time to kill is now, which is about
there we go.
executing with urgency and executing relentlessly.
Oh, okay. No, good. I mean, it's a lot of laws there, and that's the laws you follow, and then you feel that if entrepreneurs or even anyone thinking about starting a business, they follow these 12 laws, they should be it's not going to guarantee success, but at least it gives them better probability of success versus maybe any other system. And that was one of the questions I was wondering is, so what makes your book so different? Because I'm sure if anyone goes to, let's say, a Chapters, or they go to any Amazon, they'll see all these entrepreneurial books of all these sort of things. So what makes yours so special?
Well, first of all, I'm writing from the arena, right? Like I'm writing from personal lived experience. And, so it's not just theory. It's not just a business book about the business theory. It's like, this is real wartime journaling, which brings a reader into the experience of actually running a business. I use plenty of examples from both myself and other people. The actual context of this book is set in the pandemic lockdowns. So I actually started writing this book just before COVID hit.
Oh man!
Right. So I was like, I started my first business in 2011, and I had built up that business from a one-man show to building this very successful retreat center in Peru, which I built in 2014. Built that up. It became the top-rated center in Peru. I sold that in 2017, and then moved up to Costa Rica and started Soltara, which opened in 2018. And by like January 2020, it was finally profitable. It had public attention. There were influencers talking about it. We had a full staff. We had full bookings. We had good margins, strong brand, everything like that. And that was in January 2020. And so I started writing this in like January 2020, February 2020, and I was going to tell the story of how I made it and how you can too, right? And then literally like 3 weeks later, that thing from China became that thing in China and Italy, to that thing in China, Italy, and Iran. And then
all over the
by
world.
February 2020, it was that thing fucking everywhere, right? Yeah. And then literally like at the end of February, I was doing this like victory lap in United States. I was at this red carpet event for a high profile documentary that was filmed here. And then I went to like a business conference, like all VIP stuff. I went backstage to a rock concert from one of my favorite metal bands who like invited me to go and hang out because they wanted to come drink ayahuasca at my place. So I'm like on top of the world, ready to write a book about how I made it. And then boom, 2 weeks later, Costa Rica's first case of COVID in Costa Rica seals the borders, no warning, overnight. I have
Oh man.
eight employees from Peru and international stranded living with me here in Costa Rica that I now have to take care of for who knows how long. I have to keep the bills being paid for who knows how long. I've got all these customers begging and screaming for their deposits back, and who knows how many more are going to continue asking for deposits as the lockdowns continue. I've got a $320,000 balloon payment for the mortgage on the property coming up in a few months. I've got regular monthly mortgage payments, like all these things, and it's like all of a sudden the government says you now get zero revenue starting tomorrow, and we're not going to tell you when that ends. You're just going to have to wait it out. And
Yeah.
so then this whole book is set in the context of that high point to then the low point of the announcement of the lockdowns, and then going basically how I carried the business through those like 6 or 7 treacherous months of complete uncertainty and lockdown mayhem. How I got the balloon payment paid off, how I kept my staff and my business alive throughout all that time, and then how we reopened with a bang with a world famous influencer who came down to do a keynote event with us, and then we ended up becoming way stronger on the other side of those lockdowns. And now, I mean, we're on fire right now. We're booked out for 4 to 6 months in advance in 3 locations. Our
Yeah.
team has never been stronger. We've had several famous people down here as of late. And so this book kind of tells, in the context of that whole trajectory, how each of these 12 laws and principles allowed me to achieve, not only sustainability, but high level of success throughout those very treacherous and unexpected circumstances.
Wow, that's really great to hear. And just so lot, like I said, another thing, a lot to try to absorb in that whole thing there, which is okay, right? So if you can backtrack just a second there. So about your company, Soltara, is that how I pronounce it? Soltara?
Soltara.
Soltara. Okay, sorry. If you can just
Yeah.
explain to the listeners, 'cause I know some of them may be like, "Oh, he's an author," and then we're thinking about a book, and they're like, "What's this other company he's talking about?" Can you briefly describe what that is to the listeners as well? Because some of some of the stories from their book are about you building that company as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, Soltara is the primary it's my primary business right now. It's pretty much my only business except for a heavy metal band we're starting called Savage Existence. But yeah, so Soltara, we're a healing center. As I explained earlier, I got into this world of ayahuasca. Do you know what ayahuasca is?
Tell that to the listeners as well, just in case, because I might just so I don't so I can nod my head and say
Okay.
yes, but it's nice to hear the
Okay.
official version of it.
Okay, so yeah, I just did a plant medicine. So I'm kind of doing like 3 different tiers of podcasts for this book release. I'm doing the plant medicine podcasts, where it's like they're more interested in the plant medicine side, and then I'm doing entrepreneurship podcasts. Some people probably don't even know what plant medicine is, and then I'm doing music podcasts because we're targeting the whole music industry as well, and so they're probably you know more interested in the music than the entrepreneurship or the plant medicine. So, anyways, this is an entrepreneurship podcast. So, plant medicines and ayahuasca, to explain what this is, ayahuasca is a traditional medicine, plant medicine from the Amazon jungle. And it's generally composed of cooking 2 different plants from the Amazon together in a pot with water. One of those plants is called Banisteriopsis caapi, which is a vine, also known as the ayahuasca vine. And that is then kind of beaten and mashed traditionally with hammers or like a steel bar or like a stick to kind of break off the bark and smash up the vine a bit. Then you put that in a pot. And then it's mixed with the chacruna leaf, which is Psychotria viridi, and that contains dimethyltryptamine. The vine contains monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which then allows that dimethyltryptamine to be absorbed by the stomach. So you cook those two things together, it becomes like a very highly concentrated tea. And there are a number of like indigenous traditions or other spiritual religious traditions. For example, the Santo Daime in Brazil, the União do Vegetal in Brazil, and they work with this plant medicine in a spiritual context, which is like it can be used as a sacrament to connect with God or spirit or nature. It's also very effective for like you know, battling addictions or healing PTSD, or kind of connecting with your life path or opening up creativity or improving relationships or really understanding yourself. For me, it was very useful for really toughening up my mind and finding my life vision. So the particular indigenous tradition that we work with here at Soltara is called the Shipibo tradition, the Shipibo culture. There's about 30 or 40,000 Shipibo people in Peru. There are other traditions. There's like there's the other traditions in Colombia or Ecuador. There's like the mestizo tradition. There's also the Quechua tradition in Peru, and they all kind of work with ayahuasca in different ways. And the Shipibo have a certain way of doing it. So what they do is they serve the medicine in a ceremonial context. So here at Soltara, it's like a week-long retreat. It's composed of a lot of peripheral support, like therapeutic support. So people come here to really, and it's an expensive retreat. So it's significant event for people. They come here, they spend a lot of money, they spend a week here, and it can be very life transformational. So there's conversations, there's really healthy food, there's some therapeutic support, and then each week there's 4 ayahuasca ceremonies. And during these ayahuasca ceremonies, people come into the maloca, which is like a big round kind of cone-shaped wooden building with a palm roof. They sit around the outside, so it's kind of like a circular thing. Everybody's got their mattresses that they sit on and purge buckets and like a little basket with all their things in it. And then the shamans, so these shamans or healers, we call them curanderos or shamanes. They're from Peru. They're indigenous. They come up here from Peru and they work with us for a few months at a time. And they serve people this medicine. It's in a shot glass, about a 2-ounce shot glass. The medicine we get is actually made right here in Costa Rica. So the healers serve this medicine to the participants, and then the participants then go and they sit around this kind of circle, and then in about 45 minutes or so, anywhere between like 30 minutes and 90 minutes, this massive psychedelic effect takes over. So it's a psychedelic medicine. Like dimethyltryptamine is very similar to like psilocybin, for example. Kind of very nature based. It can be very visual. There'd be a lot of kind of colors and a lot of very profound visions that differ by person. It can be very, very psychedelic, or it can be a little bit psychedelic. It can be a little more physical, a little more like healing on the body. But yeah, people then during these ceremonies, which last about 4 to 7 hours at nighttime, so they start at say 7 p.m. and it can go to midnight. It could go to 2 or 3 in the morning sometimes. The shamans they sing in their native dialect. They're like energy healers in a certain way. Like they kind of, and I don't want to sound too woo woo for your entrepreneurial podcast, but um, they have their own belief system, and we put that at the forefront. And in their belief system, they believe in like the movement of energy. They believe in kind of positive and negative kind of spirits and entities that are in the room and that are maybe in your body, which they try to like push out, and they chant and they sing and they do this kind of energy work on you, all in their native language. And then, like we have facilitators here who help with the process. And then the ceremony's over, and you do that 4 times in a week, and it can be extremely powerful for people. So that's our general activity of business. And we have 20 people here per week, and we run about 45 weeks per year.
Wow.
And we have 3 locations. So,
No,
we have,
that's great to
yeah,
hear, Dan. Like, are you planning on maybe getting more locations or expanding out even more, or what are your plans
absolutely.
like long term?
We just bought another beautiful beachfront property in Playa Coyote, which is about 90 minutes from where I'm at now. And we're going to build our best location yet. We've got financing from one of the local banks here, as well as some private money. It's about a $6 million project, and it's going to be just a spectacular location right on this gorgeous prime beach that's like 2 kilometers long on the open Pacific, in a hotspot that's kind of up and coming.
Wow, no, that's great. So, yeah, back to your book here now. So, I know you wrote a previous book, right? I think it was called Pulse of the Jungle. So, can you
Yeah.
give the listeners a little bit of idea what that book was about, and how does the 12 Laws either complement it, or is it like a totally separate book altogether?
Sure. So Pulse of the Jungle, that was really that I wrote that in like 2016, and that was really a kind of a story meant to not so much be an instructional business book, but meant to be more of an inspirational story about how just a normal guy from Canada um, just walked the path, the going international and kind of finding my way to the Amazon jungle and building. I basically wrote that once the first healing center that I built in the Amazon jungle became really successful. But I didn't yet feel qualified to deliver like instructional business advice. It was more just like, here's how everything happened and how I got to this, very unique and interesting position in the Amazon jungle. And it also included some stories from other people about how, ayahuasca, this medicine I've been talking about, had impacted their lives in a long term way, not just in like an experiential kind of here's how crazy my trip was kind of way, but the actual meaning that it had for their lives. Um, and and then 12 Laws of the Jungle differs in that after doing that again, after building up another location, getting it to success, and then as I explained, keeping that organization alive throughout the most treacherous time for businesses in recent history. I felt this time a lot more qualified to offer some real tactical, instructional business advice.
Yeah, like I know throughout the book you discuss how Elon Musk pushed through the public's doubts and how he wanted to create Tesla like where it is now. So why did you choose to include some of those strategies into yours?
Well, like why did I include Elon in the book,
Or so why did you
or
choose why did you choose some of his strategies to incorporate? Like obviously because some people
yeah.
might say, "Oh, well, because look at where Tesla is." That so wouldn't we all want to mimic that, right? But is there more to it than that, or like you really mentioned it throughout, right?
Yeah, I mean, it like that example was just outlining how strategy is so important in business. And like sometimes you have to put the horse before the cart, if you want to really advance your destiny forward. And so that was just about, strategic. That was an example about creating strategic checkpoints in order to reach your final destination. So, Elon's final destination was and his company mission is basically he wants to help accelerate the world's transition into renewable energy, right? Noble goal. The problem with renewable energy is that the public's perception is not extremely favorable from a functional perspective. And when he wanted to build electric cars, when he was starting this industry, he thought that electric cars could be really good, but the public didn't. And his goal, in support of transitioning the world to renewable energy, was to have, majority of people owning electric cars, like a small, kind of electric car that's, as I call in the book, a wimpy, eco-conscious electric vehicle. But anyone who had tried electric cars in the past had failed, either on performance or on saleability, because the demand wasn't there. So what he did before he could get there, he knew that he needed to change public's opinion on electric vehicles. So instead of creating like his end goal first of like getting this affordable, like the Model 3, which is like this affordable kind of small compact car that runs on electricity that, should be ubiquitous throughout society, that kind of style of vehicle. Like he knew that he needed to shatter people's perceptions of electric vehicles first. So instead of starting with that one, he started with the Roadster, which was just meant to be like the most like preposterously high performing and like ego stroking vehicle that he could possibly create. So he, worth $200,000, but it goes 0 to 60 in like 2.5 seconds or something like that. And it looks awesome. He built it on a Lotus body, and it was like, wow, damn, that was the first example of electric cars that could actually beat a Lamborghini, so then that raises people's eyebrows. It's like, okay. And then he went from that to building the Model S, which was $100,000 car, but equally as high performing and a little more functional in terms of it being a sedan. And then, starting the wave that way, getting the early adopters who are highly capitalized to come in and buy these high performing vehicles. He started building his company, building their experience, building their name, building their profile. And then at the end of it, now where they're at now, they're completely sold out they can't keep vehicles coming off the line fast enough. And they have this $30,000 Model 3, which is like one of the top selling cars, in the United States.
Well, that's the funny thing, though.
Great range, and yeah.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, Dan, because if you think about it, what most entrepreneurs maybe start with, they don't really start with like, the good, better, best. And say, okay, we'll start with the good, so we can try to get like the masses to kind of buy into this, so we can show them, we can, before we go to the better and the best versions. But what you're saying, Elon went from the top first, he went for the best and worked its way down to the good. So like you said, get that early adopter, say, oh yeah, okay, that's interesting. Because like you said, if he tried that, let's start with like, the economy size one, then they'll be like, well, I don't know. We don't really see why that would be the one to go with. But the fact that you can, like you said, drive fast in a Lamborghini right away, and it looks sleek and everything. And yes, it's more expensive, but yeah, we're now working on getting more of the general car that most people can afford. And like you said, it's really hard to find a Tesla nowadays that you can buy it. Because I think let's say if I was ever big enough to try to get one of those, who knows how long it'll take for it. It might be 2024, maybe by the time your model is ready, right?
I mean, I put a deposit down on a Cybertruck like 2 years ago, and it's still not off the line yet.
Oh boy. Wow. That's how popular it is. And then he's also trying to do this whole SpaceX thing as well, or going to outer space. I don't know if I'll ever, would you go on that spaceship?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. How many people can say they've been on one, right?
Very few.
Very few. All right. So back to your book here. So you we're talking about this right now, and like this is about entrepreneurship, and let's talk about the industry right now. Just what do you think the general state of entrepreneurship is right now? Like, do you see more or less, or like people trying to come up with new things? And where do you think it's going to go in the future?
I think it's very important. I think I'm actually very optimistic about the opportunities in entrepreneurship. Oh, from now, I mean, going forward, because um, based on global conditions right now, you're already seeing supply chain move back very quickly to North America. So, between Canada, US, and Mexico, and maybe, kind of a Colombia, something like that, a lot of the supply chain that had shifted to Asia in the past 30 years is going to come back and come back very quickly. So anybody who is interested in like a production, manufacturing, engineering, technology business, the opportunities are very, very, very ripe. I mean, you're gonna end up seeing like government spending on bringing manufacturing back to United States. Um, and it can't happen fast enough because you see this pressure from China on Taiwan right now. um, that is a major geostrategic risk for the Western world, considering all the computer chips that are produced in Taiwan. And then, as we saw in the pandemic, when you have like 80% of your supply chain based offshore, then you're really at the mercy of what happens offshore. You're not, like, and that can really uh, damage your society at home. So you're going to see a
Yeah.
lot of manufacturing coming back. So I think, uh, for entrepreneurs, there's huge opportunities in manufacturing stateside, but also at the same time, we're about to go through a very difficult economic situation. There's more than likely to be an extreme crash or recession, basically imminently, especially if any of these conflicts get any worse, or if China goes into Taiwan, which is,
Hmm.
you know, more likely than not to happen in the near future. It's really gonna make it hard to get anything done. So I would say, hang on to your cash for the next year or two until things start picking back up, or wait until some deflation happens before you start buying property or equipment, because right now prices are high and it's about to go for a dip.
Yeah.
Um, but optimistic about the medium term to long term. I've done a lot of reading on geopolitics and geography and stuff like that, and I would recommend anybody to look up a guy named Peter Zeihan, Zeihan, or if you're in Canada, Zeihan, Peter. Uh, he's got awesome, awesome, awesome information uh, about how the next like 0 to 30, 50 years plays out in terms of global economics and geopolitics and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, like I totally agree with what you're talking about. Like I think the pandemic really showed how countries who were so reliant on importing all their stuff really kind of got left holding the bag because like I think I totally agree that I know Canada as well, they're trying to bring in more, you know, be more self-sufficient, which I think every country should try to be as self-sufficient as possible, right? So I feel really bad for like the third world countries where like 95% of their stuff is imported, right? They're oh, they took a huge punch in the gut on that one. And I like you said about the creativity because that's how this podcast kind of started. I wasn't planning to be a podcaster. I was just doing some website mobile testing that needed good quality audio. And I was like, okay, what else I can use this equipment for? And for some reason, I thought podcasting, but I was like, I don't know about what, right? And then I'm watching the news, and like I tell people, if you want to be depressed, listen to the news. But I was listening to the news and hear about all these small businesses kind of going under, right? And they're following all the rules and the lockdowns, and they're all getting screwed over. So I was like, okay, well, let's hear some of
That
their
was that
stories.
was the most infuriating thing I've ever experienced in my life, man.
Absolutely,
These idiots in
yeah, like
government who have no idea what it's like to build an organization. and they just treat businesses like, a dime a dozen, um, making these insane rules that basically
Yeah.
just how many hardworking people just got completely screwed over, and not by necessity. I mean, then when they felt like you're just like, okay, we're going to stop talking about all this stuff now. We're going to stop fear mongering now. Everything's back to normal, even though like same amount of people are going to the hospital or whatever. Like
Yeah.
it was
Well,
just, it was utterly infuriating for me.
yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately all the governments kind of dropped the ball on this because they took what I call the shotgun approach to closures, as opposed to it being more like a sniper rifle, to really understand, okay, what's really causing it, and we shut it down sector by sector versus everybody shut down, right? Because some businesses couldn't handle that, right? Like, and it was really unfortunate that a lot of people unfortunately didn't survive it, right? And unfortunately, they still had, like you said, like you had your experience yourself. You still had the balloon payment, you still had your mortgage payment. All the expenses were still there, but the supports
Yeah.
for the people were either not there or they were only there and only covered just a little bit, right? And you still had
It
to
was
find
like
ways.
Canada, the Canadian government, offered a $40,000 loan, Canadian dollar loan, which is like $30,000 US. And it's like, yeah, but my balloon payment's 320 US. So like, what's this going to do for me? My monthly expenses are
Yeah,
like
that's not
80
going to
grand
be able to help.
US, like on lockdown. So like, what's this going to do for me? So like, it's just clueless people virtue signaling and trying to just, show how ethical they are without being practical in any way. Um, yeah, that was at least
Yeah,
Costa
no,
Rica. Costa Rica was actually really sensible about it. They overreacted at the beginning, and they just shut down the whole country for like 6 7 months. But then once they realized that they're about to lose their whole tourism sector, and that people were going to actually go hungry, and they were going to actually lose all their tax revenue, and the real estate sector was actually going to collapse, they were like, okay, we'll open the borders. So they just opened the borders in November of 2020, when so many other countries were still freaking out, like Canada for one, Australia, you know, um, and but Costa Rica and the U.S. opened up, and we survived the first year. We basically survived all of 2021 on 100% American clients.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah, because everywhere else like wouldn't let people leave, or like the regulations were too ridiculous. Uh,
yeah. It was pretty tough, I have to definitely admit. So,
Hey you, do you need a voiceover? Well, look no farther. Northway Capital Group has your answer. Commercials and explainer videos, AVR and voicemail, health and wellness, corporate training and e-learning, announcements, documentaries, and biography. Contact us on social media or email us at northwaycapitalgroup@gmail.com. Now it's time for tips from the pro.
all right, tips. We're gonna hit our tips from the pro segment here. So this is more like we're gonna say we want to try to get into similar space of yours. In this case, about the writing process, but also like see see what type of landmines we can avoid that you might have stepped on there, Dan. So I guess the first question for this one is, what is the actual writing process for you? Do you set the mood in a certain way? Do you just, if it's something just comes to mind, do you just start writing? How is your writing process like?
well, I hired a co-author, Matt Cartagena, who helped me with this particular book. Um, I had a co-author for the first book as well, but with this book, it was an interesting process because I was right in the middle of this whole kind of pandemic survival process. So I'm every single day I'm in the arena making moves on the business chessboard, and then at night, me and Matt Cartagena would, we would have a call. He would interview me and like record the calls, and then um, and we would kind of distill the lessons that I was picking up from that business chessboard, and put those down in a digestible and succinct, and engaging way. And then it's kind of a back and forth process of I would kind of set the tone for the chapter with like, you know, a 1 or 2 page overview. And then we would have these interviews, and he would extract. His company's called Unpack Genius, and so it's kind of self-explanatory. He works with people to kind of unpack what's in their mind. So we would do this. He would record. He would put together, you know, like a chapter, and then he would send it to me, and then I would kind of edit and make suggestions and things like that. And that's how we did the whole book. We got it done, and then it was, and then we went to the publisher, and then, you know, the publisher reviewed the whole manuscript and made a couple of suggestions, and then we took it from there.
Nice. Wow. It's good to have help. I think some people think they have to write the whole thing themselves. And maybe in some cases you might have to just to get that thing going. But I guess working with a co-author to at least help organize some of your thoughts, right? Because if anyone just tries to write their own book, it'll probably be all over the place. And I guess having
Yeah,
someone with experience of that was able to structure it in a way that, like you said, that's very digestible, right? Which is really good to hear. So so
exactly.
next question is, how do you filter out what stories you want to include and others you had to cut? Because eventually, you've had an extraordinary career where you have like probably 1.5 billion stories your entire lifetime here. So how were you able to narrow down the ones that you ended up including in the book and ones that, were this close, but I have to not include it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of like um intuition, or you know, you just want to be very careful not to have something like really kind of long and monotonous, and you want to keep things kind of tight and punchy. So that was just an interactive process between me and Matt. We didn't really, you know, have a set system. It was just kind of analyzing on a case by case basis.
No, that's great to hear. So what should an aspiring author, I guess, what type of things should they be careful of when they start to try to write their own manuscript or their own book? Like I know you mentioned before, not to get too uh, long-winded for when some of these chapters. Is there any other tips you can give them to say, okay, I know even you had a co-author that we helped this, but here's some things you might want to be careful of.
Yeah, I think a trap that some people can fall in when writing is making the book about them when the book should be about the reader. You know, you want to make sure that in every sentence your objective is to deliver value to the reader rather than, you know, talk about just like, you know, yourself or whatever. If you're doing a nonfiction book, um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not the pro on in terms of the actual content, um, but you know, because I had the co-author there who really helped with that. But um, I found that as one of my pitfalls is, you know, it's your life, so you know all these things are important to you, but a lot of those things are not important to anyone else. So you really want to be careful of like, you know, not boring the reader by uh talking about things that aren't important to them.
Right. Yeah. Like you want to have a little bit of that hook and that nice big event that happens in the end. Like when my wife tried to explain to me what the story she was trying to go through, where at the end of the day, it was like my aunt-in-law wanting to buy a melon and the price was too expensive. And my wife was taking me on this journey where it's like, so she wanted to buy a melon. She's like, yeah, you think you could have started with that as opposed to telling me on this 10-minute tirade of all the things she was kind of going through to find the perfect melon. I'm like, okay, I could have done with just saying, she found a great melon at a great price. Oh, good. We got to the end of the story. Excellent. Versus that other thing. So, what about this situation? So, what do you find is the best tips for now for the entrepreneur that has to deal with either a difficult client or difficult staff? Like, you run a company of like 40 people, like you said, and growing. What's your best strategy for them on how to deal with that?
What do you mean by difficult?
Difficult could be whether it's clients not paying, or maybe it's difficult staff in general that are maybe they're toxic, they're bringing some toxicity to the workplace. So how do you, in your best environment, what's the best advice you can deal with, or you can tell people how they should try to deal with stuff like that?
Well, I mean, sometimes you just need to cut people, whether that's clients or staff. There's a lot of business theory out there that suggests, you know, you should be constantly rotating out your, you know, your bottom 10% of staff, or your bottom 20% of clients even. Um, Tim Ferriss talks a lot about the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, where you've got a small percentage of customers who cause the vast majority of your headaches. You've also got a small percentage of employees who cause the vast majority of your headaches. And it's better just to get rid of those. You get rid of a small percentage of people, and then you get rid of the vast majority of your headaches. I also have a chapter in the book, Plan for Snake Bites, which provides a few kind of um, strategies for dealing with that type of thing. But sometimes money can make the problem go away. If you've got, say, a difficult person who's trying to take you to court for something, or betray you for something, you can sometimes pay your way out of it. But the best prevention is always the best medicine. So if you're conscious about who you bring into your orbit, don't ever trust anybody completely, because people are two-faced. It's almost like I kind of believe that everyone is going to betray you eventually. It's just a matter of when. So you just need to be careful, and you need to not put all your eggs in one basket, and you always need to have a backup plan. But more importantly, just constantly be surveilling the landscape for potential issues, and then try to cut them out at the root as soon as possible.
No, that's great advice. I've had some guests that have talked about, like you said, that pre-screening stuff of actually being very picky of who type of client you bring in, but even to some of the point of actual employees. Like, I think I had one guest where she was saying that they almost don't hire on pure technical skills anymore. They can have a doctorate, an MBA, but if they're a toxic person, they don't want to have anything to do with them. Because it's like her rationale was, you can't teach them to be a good person, right? Which is unfortunate, right? But hey, do you need an error-free website? Do you need transcription that's accurate and on time? Would you like to remove noise from your video or audio recording? Do you need a spokesperson for your business? If so, we can help. At Northway Capital Group, we are happy to announce that we are now providing website testing services, audio transcriptions, and audio cleanup, as well as spokesperson services. We would love to help you on your next project. Contact us for more information at northwaycapitalgroup@gmail.com.
Now it's time for the rapid fire round.
All right, here we go for the rapid fire round. Okay, so Dan, what would the 15-year-old self imagine you'd be doing right now?
Probably exactly the same thing I'm doing.
Wow, all right, that's great. Best tip to achieve a work-life balance for a small business owner?
Make sure you got lots of profit margin, and so you can pay people to do almost everything for you. I try to outsource basically every single task and duty that I can, and I right now I only end up doing stuff that nobody else can do, which is very few things.
Okay, oh, good to hear. All right, another of our fun stuff. Which word or phrase do you overuse the most?
Probably the F word.
Love it. All right. What is one subscription you cannot live without?
Apple.
Apple. Okay, good. Related to food now. If you can name a sandwich after yourself, what would be in it, and what would it be called?
What would be in it? Ham, turkey, lettuce, tomato, green peppers, pickles, onions, mustard, salt and pepper, mayonnaise. And I would call that the Cleland.
Love it. Put on a shirt. Excellent. If you could live in any other country than where you are now, what would it be and why?
I think Costa Rica is the best country to live for me, and for so many ways. Um, if I didn't live here, I'd probably go live in Florida.
Nice. Nice. Florida is really nice. I've been there a
And
few
why?
times.
Because it's a friendly environment for entrepreneurs. The weather is decent. There's plenty of green space. The beaches are good. The people are cool. Great restaurants, decent roads, great economic outlook, and super convenient in terms of uh, flight logistics.
Nice. Now, in your opinion, does Governor DeSantis stay as the governor, or do you think he'll try to become president?
I think that DeSantis serves a very important role in as governor of Florida. I think he'd be a good president. However, I don't think Trump's stepping out of the way. And unless DeSantis joins Trump, which I think might be not a great uh, possibility because they're both number one guys. DeSantis doesn't want to be number two guy. However, if it's with Trump under the expectation that for these 4 years he's number two and then he goes for another 8 years as number one, I could potentially see that happening. I could also see Trump going with female candidates such as Tulsi Gabbard or Nikki Haley.
Uh,
Um, so I would say the 2024 ticket is either Trump plus DeSantis or Trump plus Nikki Haley or Trump plus Tulsi Gabbard. Um, I could see a wild card be a Mike Pompeo in there somewhere as well. But if you really want to beat the Democrats at their own game, you get Tulsi Gabbard or Nikki Haley, who are both women of color, except with
hmm,
Republican values.
there you go. Interesting. It's curious to see how that's got to work. I know we still got a couple of years, or maybe actually no, less than a couple of years, right? Because now we're almost approaching the end of 2022. So can't believe
Yeah.
it's almost
So
year
I
end.
mean, the midterms are coming up. Uh, the midterms are coming up in a couple of weeks, and I think
Yeah.
if the Republicans take the House and the Senate, I think you're going to see Trump announce his candidacy right away.
Mhm.
And then it's going to be a battle for who's on the ticket with him. Um, but if Trump gets taken out by anything, whether it be one of the investigations that's breathing down his neck, or whether it be for any other reason, I think then you'll see DeSantis step up because he's the next popular guy in line. But if Trump can in any way, shape, or form run, it seems like he's going to be the guy, and I can see him getting either Nikki Haley or Tulsi Gabbard on his
So it's
ticket.
interesting to hear. All right, last question on here. As to all my guests there, Dan, what is your theme song and why? So that song hits, you're walking down, people hear that song, they're like, "Yo, Dan's coming."
uh, Geez, that's a good question. Um, how about I'll plug my own band, Animals by
There you go.
Savage Existence.
There we
The
go. That's the
chorus.
theme song.
Yeah,
Love it.
Animals by
So,
Savage Existence. Go check it out on Spotify.
oh, we'll definitely send the links out to the users as well as where. So, where can people find the book for right now? Dan?
Well, it's actually the book. The book goes out tomorrow. So if you go to my Instagram at Daniel C Cleland, you can register for a notification, or if you want to help us out with a review on the book, we'll send you a free ebook and the Kindle version in exchange for leaving a review. But if the hardcovers or the paperbacks are all going to be available on Amazon tomorrow, and so you can connect with me on Instagram or you can connect with our email list by checking out that link in the bio on Instagram. I think you're also going to put up some links in the description here. Um, but yeah, Daniel C. Cleland is the main hub, or at my website if you're not on Instagram at danielcleland.com. Sorry, www.danielcleland.com, and we'll have
Um,
everything up there.
and excellent. And your book has also been forwarded by Patrick Bet David, who's like one of the top YouTube entrepreneurial channels I think ever. I think that's the one I enjoy listening to. I listen to his podcast. I like watching his videos as well. And he wrote the forward for it. How'd you get that from working with him?
That's law 3 of 12 laws of the jungle, learn to hunt. And that law, I talk about the law of reciprocity. So, I got involved with his community. I, invested in like some consulting and some mentorship and, contributing to his mentorship program and stuff like that. And then when the time came to have a forward written for the book, I was able to access him, and fortunately also had some resources to compensate him for his time to write a forward. So yeah, that was how we got it done.
Wow, that's great to hear. And I know it's going to be a good book. I know I'm going to probably try and make sure I read it as well and try to follow that as well to hopefully grow my business and be as successful as Dan is right here. So any other final thoughts, Dan, that you can give the listeners?
No, sir. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you guys are able to check out the book and connect with it, and hopefully it provides you with some value to build your life and build your personal freedom and wealth.
Do you have a small business story to share? The S.M.E. Stories podcast is looking for entrepreneurs to share their tales of success, failure, and everything. If you're interested in being a guest on our show or know someone would be a great fit, please contact us at northwaycapitalgroup@gmail.com. That's northwaycapitalgroup@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening to the S.M.E. Stories podcast, which is owned by Northway Capital Group. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Northway Capital Group.